Welcome back. I'm super glad you joined us again this week. Let's review what we've learned so far in the big story of the Bible. Who made the world? God made the world. And what did he say about it when he made it? He said it was good. Why are humans very good? Humans are very good because they're made in God's image. Now, if the world was good and we were very good, why aren't all things very good? Adam and Eve chose to take things and go their own way, just like each of us do today. We're going to use this song now to review what we've learned so far.
Who do you trust? Who do you listen to? How are you gonna live your life? This is a choice we've gotta wrestle through. Every girl and boy and man and wife. God gave Adam and Eve a choice. Trust him or trust the voices they heard around him. They chose poorly. By turning away from God, they said they didn't believe him. They were going to go their own way. And sin entered the world.
What's sin?
Sin is when we ignore God, when we go our own way, when we put ourselves first in front of our friends and neighbors and in front of God. When we say to God, I don't care what you say, I'm going to do it my way. Sin entering the world changed everything.
Why?
Because of who God is. God is so pure, sin cannot be near him. Now that serpent knew that. He was trying to hurt God, and he knew if he could get Adam and Eve to sin, then they couldn't be close to God. God's most beloved creatures would have to live their lives apart from him.
Couldn't God just change the rules so they could be with him again? He can do anything, right?
Yes, God can do anything. Anything except change his own nature. He can't change who he is. If God changed who he was, he wouldn't be God anymore. So even though it made God very, very sad, Adam and Eve had to leave the garden and live new lives in a wild, mean world. Now they're a long, long way from paradise. Yes, they're a long, long way from home. And now the world they're in ain't very nice because they're living on their own. So once again we ask the question, who do you trust? Who do you listen to? How are you gonna live your life? This is a choice we've gotta wrestle through. Every girl and boy and man and wife.
This isn't a very happy story.
Nope, and unfortunately the rest of primeval history only gets worse. Sin has a way of spreading, so much so that one of Adam and Eve's sons turned on his brother and killed him.
Oh no.
Then there were more and more people and more sin until God's creation was drowning in sin. God decided the only way to keep his creation from drowning in sin was to drown the sin. So he flooded the whole world.
Oh, I know this story.
Yep, all that sin was washed away. Unfortunately, so was most of his creation. But he chose one family, led by one man, to start over.
Noah.
That's right. Noah had tried to avoid sin all his life so he could be closer to God. He wasn't perfect, but he was a good man who listened for God's voice. That's why God chose him to start things over. Him and a bunch of animals, of course.
Who came in by twosies.
Except for the ones they used for food. They came in by sevensies. You see, Noah trusted God and listened to God, and God used his family to start over again, to give his creation a second chance.
Is that the end of primeval history?
Unfortunately, no. After the flood, Noah's family was still living in a broken world full of temptation to do your own thing. They were a long, long way from paradise. They were a long, long way from home. And some of Noah's kids were not so nice as they were living on their own. They wondered, who should we trust? Who should we listen to? How are we gonna live our lives? This is a choice we've gotta wrestle through. All the girls and boys and men and wives.
Now here's maybe a tricky question. Do you remember what God was doing last week when he found that Adam and Eve had eaten the fruit. God made Adam and Eve and wanted a loving relationship with them. And his presence was with them in a special way in the garden. They could go for walks together. But they turned away from God to their own way and chose to take the fruit, chose to trust the lies of the snake. And what did God do? Did he turn his back on them? No. He came looking for them in the garden when they were hiding. And he told them the bad things that were going to happen to them now because they were turning their backs on him. And when he did, what did he do to take care of them before they left the garden? He killed an animal to cover over them, to make clothes for them. Because Adam and Eve had turned away from God, they couldn't be in his special presence in the garden face to face with him anymore. They couldn't continue to eat from the tree of life and live forever in a broken relationship with him. But what was God's plan that he hinted about when he told Adam and Eve of the bad things that would happen because they were turning away from God? God had a plan to defeat the snake, evil, and sin forever. He was going to send the snake crusher, one of Eve's great grandsons, Jesus. But while God never ever left his people, they kept turning their faces away from him. They kept choosing to define good for themselves. They kept turning away from God, getting further and further and further and further away from his presence, away from ruling the world his way. But he kept chasing them, even while they had to leave his presence. He found Adam and Eve in the garden when they hid from him and promised to send the snake crusher. When Cain wanted to kill his own brother Abel, God found Cain and came to him and encouraged him to choose to rule over sin. But Cain turned to his own way and killed his brother. And as we saw in this song, things got so bad and God was so sad for how bad the world had become. He acted to wash the badness away. But he would still save the people he had created.
Stories of the Bible. Noah and the flood. This is Noah.
Hey!
Noah was a good man who tried to do the right thing.
Yeah!
But in the time when Noah lived, he was the only man on earth who was doing the right thing. All the other people on earth were doing evil things and hurting each other. This made God very sad. So God said that he was going to send a flood to the earth that would destroy every living thing on earth because he was sorry he ever made them. But God decided to save Noah and his family. God told Noah to build a boat and fill it with 2 of every kind of animal and bird.
Colored, bird, moth, okay, all here?
Noah did just that, and then Noah and his whole family boarded the boat and waited for the flood to come. The rain fell hard for 40 days and 40 nights.
Whoa!
Water covered the whole earth, and the boat floated safely on the surface. Water covered even the highest mountains on earth, but Noah and his family were saved. God remembered Noah and all the animals on the boat. God sent a wind to blow across the earth, and the flood began to go away. After 5 months, the boat came to rest on a mountaintop. A few months later, the other mountains could be seen. 40 days later, Noah opened a window and released a raven. The bird flew back and forth until the flood had dried up. He also sent a dove out to see if it could find dry ground, but the dove couldn't find a place to land because there was still water on the ground. So the dove returned to the boat.
Oh, hello again.
After another 7 days, Noah sent the dove out again. This time, it came back with an olive leaf.
Oh, bingo!
So Noah knew that the floodwaters were almost gone. A week later, he sent the dove out again, and it didn't come back. So many months after the flood began, Noah opened the covering of the boat and saw that the ground was drying. He waited 2 more months, and at last, the earth was dry. Then God said to Noah, "Leave the boat, all of you. Release the animals so they can be fruitful and multiply throughout the earth."
Okay!
So Noah, his family, and all the animals finally left the boat.
See ya!
Noah built an altar to the Lord to make a sacrifice to God. God was pleased with Noah's offering and said to himself that he would never again destroy every living thing on earth. God blessed Noah and his sons and promised them that he would never send another flood. He gave them the rainbow in the sky as a sign of this promise to Noah, his family, and all of mankind.
After the flood was over, God made a promise. What did he promise, and what was the sign for that promise? We'll read the answer in verse 20. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. And the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, "Never again will I curse the ground because of the humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. And never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease." Then God blessed Noah and his sons, saying to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth." Remember, that's the same command, the same mission he gave Adam and Eve to do. Then God said to Noah and his sons with him, "I now establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that was with you. I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth." And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. And whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all the living creatures of every kind on the earth." Now that's a new word. We are going to talk a lot about this unit. Covenant. I want everybody to say it with me. Covenant. Okay, I'm sure you probably didn't say it, so let's do it one more time. Covenant. A covenant is a special promise, a vow, like when two people get married and they vow to love each other and be faithful to each other forever. That's a covenant between two people made in front of God and witnesses. But here is God making a covenant, a promise, a vow to the people and all the creatures of the earth. And Noah and the people promise nothing. This is an unconditional promise of God, even though the people are going to keep doing bad things. Even though Noah and his sons, right in like 5 seconds in the next page of the Bible, are going to do bad things, God will continue to give them grace and mercy. He will continue to give them life on earth, springtime and harvest. And we will see him make a covenant with Abraham, and a covenant with the nation of Israel, and a covenant with King David. And lastly, he's going to make a covenant with the whole world, a new covenant through Jesus.
If you've been around Christians, you've probably heard of the idea of having a personal relationship with God, which could mean different things in the Bible, like having God as a friend, or your father, or maybe your teacher.
But there's one particular way that the Bible talks about this relationship that you find all over. But strangely, we don't talk about it that much. And that's the idea of a partnership with God.
A partnership like working alongside someone to accomplish a goal together.
Right, and this is actually what you see at the beginning of the Bible. God creates this good world full of all of this potential. And then God appoints these unique creatures, humans, as his partners in bringing more and more goodness out of all that potential.
But the humans don't want to partner with God. They rebel and try to create a world on their own terms.
And so this broken partnership is the Bible's explanation for why we're stuck in a world of corruption and injustice and the tragedy of death.
It's not like there's just one or two humans who have bailed on this relationship. In the story of the Bible, everyone has abandoned the partnership with God.
So what God does is select a smaller group of people out of the many, and he makes a new partnership with them called a covenant. And in a covenant, God makes promises and then in exchange asks his partner to fulfill certain commitments. And the purpose of all of this is to somehow use this covenant relationship to renew his partnership with everybody else.
Now, there are actually 4 times in the Old Testament that we're told God initiates a covenant relationship with Noah, Abraham, the nation of Israel, and King David.
And it's through these that God is forming a covenant family into which all people will eventually be invited.
So let's see how these work. The first one is with Noah.
So in this story, God has just brought the flood to cleanse the world of humanity's corruption, and Noah and his family are the only ones left. And so God makes a covenant with Noah, saying, listen, I know that humans will continue to be evil, but despite that, I'm not going to destroy it like this again. Instead, the earth will be this reliable place for us to work together.
Great. So what does Noah have to do?
Nothing. And that's what's so interesting about this first covenant, is that God is promising to be faithful, even though he knows humans won't be.
Even though Noah was a righteous man, after the flood, after God makes a covenant with Noah and all people, Noah does some foolish things and some bad things. And one of his sons does a bad thing. The flood hasn't washed away all the badness of the human heart, the badness that distorts the image of God in us. And here's an example. The water of the flood didn't wash away the sin and the selfishness in people's hearts. Adam and Eve didn't fulfill the mission God gave them, and Noah didn't. And spoiler alert, Abraham wouldn't be a good covenant keeper, and Israel would not be a good covenant keeper, and David wouldn't be. We need someone. We needed a person who could fulfill the covenant, who could be the faithful covenant partner to God, someone who could fulfill their mission, someone who can resurrect and recreate the image of God in me. And that person was coming. Jesus was coming. God himself would be the perfect human covenant partner and fulfill his mission and crush the snake forever. Let's pray. Father, thank you that when we don't choose to trust you, that when we turn our faces from you, you keep pursuing us. You make a way to save us. Thank you that you promised you would never wash away everything in the world again, and that you sent Jesus to be that perfect, trusting covenant partner and fulfill his mission to defeat the power of sin and death. And thank you that because of that, we can have a relationship with you in your presence, and that one day we'll get to be fully in your presence, just like Adam and Eve were in the beginning, and go for a walk with you, face to face, side by side. We love you, Jesus. Amen.